There's a brand new verdict when you take a look at the research that has been done by a university study that is just out on President Obama's stimulus plan and what it really did for jobs in the United States. This is an exhaustive study done by two economists, and it says basically that the plan saved, remember the sort of saved or created moniker there, that it saved 450,000 government sector jobs. But this study says that it actually destroyed or delayed 1 million private sector jobs, meaning that at the end of the day, this effort costs more jobs, the trillion-dollar stimulus, than it created. This is a hugely controversial study that is out there, and it has some incredible implications. Lars Larson joins me now. He's syndicated radio talk show host, and also Rob Thompson, radio talk show host as well. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Good morning.
You know, I went through this morning, and it's very interesting. Basically, it says that a lot of the stimulus money went to the states, and that the states used that money to cover some of the difficulties in their own coffers, which we have detailed exhaustively here at Fox News. And so that because that money got swallowed up in the states with their, bloated coffers and their debt, it wasn't able to create the kind of jobs that it should have created. Rob, what do you say to that?
What do I say to that? I say, an exhaustive study on a subject that is incomplete. We don't have the final numbers on what the stimulus actually did. Many of the parts of the stimulus haven't even come online yet. As President Obama is just about to address the jobs issue and using the funds from the stimulus back in 2009. So while we're talking about some very poor numbers, and yes, there are some issues that do need to be discussed and how the states handle the situation, the stimulus itself has not taken full effect. And for us to say it was a complete failure or even a partial failure, we're judging this thing way, way too early.
All right, so we can't say if it's a complete failure or a partial failure at this point, according to Rob. Lars, what say you?
Rob, I'm sorry. What a load of baloney. All the words, the final verdict isn't in yet. They've spent the money. And in fact, most of us in the business have spent the last couple of years documenting all the crazy ways that the government chose to spend the money on every lunatic idea in the world. And of course, to make sure that all the unions' pockets got padded. How can you say that with all the money spent and the horse out of the barn, that the verdict isn't in yet? Government does not create jobs. The private sector creates jobs. Government creates make work.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too, when you dig into this thing. A couple of the other measures that they look at are the state's, ability to attract funding, right? So that's politics, obviously. It also took a look at the political party of the governor in terms of each state where the money went. That also came into play. And it raises some really serious questions, Rob, about this trillion-dollar stimulus, and all of that money. And, but besides the fact that the jobs weren't created, it's an exercise, perhaps, if these two economists are onto something here, in futility at a time when the country was just desperate for some real help.
I think you've hit the nail on the head again in a very important situation. Keep in mind the mindset that we were all in back in 2009. Something desperately needed to be done. The G20 was in trouble. Banks were falling apart. Previous administrations had let certain parts of our economy run amok and really cause a recession and a downfall. Something had to be done. The states were given the ability to take the money or not. Some did, some didn't. Some used it appropriately, some did not. But the bottom line is we do not know the final outcome of this, and for any economist to say it was an absolute failure is a complete falsehood. It's completely wrong. We don't know where things are headed. Housing numbers are still not strong, and they're not going to turn around.
Rob, I think even you can accept that you're not launching a vigorous defense of the stimulus package. So it sounds like you yourself have some real questions about this whole program.
I think we all do. I think we all rightfully should. There's certainly, it's my money that was spent just like yours, and I think questions do need to be asked. But you do need to keep in mind the situation at the time. We desperately needed to lead the world out of a recession. We don't have the fail-safes well, yes, we still do. And as we look at what we were dealing with back in 2009, we don't have the government fail-safes, the socialism that you deal with in Europe. We had to take care of with an active Congress to take care of all of this.
I knew that Rob couldn't get through the answer.
Hold on, Rob. Let Lars talk.
I knew that Rob couldn't couldn't get through that answer without blaming George Bush, although you wouldn't want to let his name cross your lips, would you, by blaming the previous administration for going crazy. Martha, let me give you one great example that I know of. In Massachusetts, the federal government poured hundreds of millions of dollars into a solar cell manufacturer, which then went bankrupt. And all that money disappeared, and the jobs didn't happen. There's a good practical example, Rob, of how the government picking winners and losers, and of course funding union jobs, is not the way to revive an economy. It never has been, never will be.
Well, I urge everyone to take a look at it. You know,
it is.
I mean, but it is, when you look at this study and just you see where the money went, and you see that how much politics had to do with which states were receiving this kind of money, and whether or not, you know, the bottom line is whether or not it did the job. And $1 trillion is not something where you just say, well, we had to throw something at it because we were in a desperate situation and we had to just see what would work. Rob, just one last thought before we go.
Well, we did have to see what would work, and many things did work. I think if you look back at the cash for clunkers and getting cars off the streets and new purchases and trying to get the economy moving, that in fact did work. Other things to do against the wall,
that made
no,
jobs?
they did not, and we will be the first ones to admit it. No, yes, it did. It's called the multiplier, Mike. Look it up. It's essentially if someone buys a car, the car salesman can go out and buy himself a car.
And it's by Tim Conley and Bill Dupor. So everybody at home can take a look at it and see what you think yourselves. Rob Thompson and Lars Larson, thank you, gentlemen. Good to have you here as always. We appreciate it.
Hope and change.